Great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for CC Live, powered by Campbell and Company. This is our first of these live conversations, which we're hoping to do many more of in the future, but appreciate you all joining us for this first ever conversation where we'll be talking about maintaining donor relationships in a time of change. My name is Adam Wilhelm. I'm a senior vice president with Campbell and Company. I've been with the firm for about 15 years. Work with our clients across the nonprofit sector and across the country, and happy to be sitting here in our headquarters in Chicago today. And very happy to be joined by Chris Toth. Chris and I have been working together over the last year or so, and was very excited to invite him to this conversation because I know there are a lot of rich things that he has to share on a number of topics related to the main theme of our discussion today. So Chris, would love for you to introduce yourself and your institution and maybe a little bit of your background.
Sure. Thank you, Adam. Again, I'm Chris Toft. I'm the VP for Institutional Advancement at Adler University. Adler is a graduate school only, and it's located in Chicago and Vancouver, British Columbia, and online. We have about 2,000 students throughout those three campuses, and we've been in existence for 70 years. This is a terrific time for me and for Adler to talk about transition with Adam and Campbell and Company, because our president, Ray Crossman, who's been serving for almost 20 years, recently announced that he will be departing at the end of the FY24 academic year. And so we're in search right now, and we're thinking about how do we maintain those donor relationships and make sure that the board and the senior team understand what they need to and can do in order to make sure that our donor relationships are not only maintained but strengthened during that time.
I'm sure that many of the folks who are joining us today, fundraisers in different positions, have been in that seat when you hear our president, CEO, executive director is leaving, and the anxiety that can cause, but also the opportunity that it brings forward. Before I launch into the first question, I just want to share, Campbell and Company's mission is to collaborate and innovate with people who change lives through philanthropic vision and action. And we are great admirers of Adler's mission, both in the work that you do educating people, but also the great work that you do in communities to advance the mental health of those, especially those who aren't as fortunate to be able to access care. And so I just want to say thanks for the work that you do. Really appreciate it. So first topic, we're in this very strange time right now. I've been in meetings with people where we say, oh, we're in this post-pandemic period, if we can say post-pandemic, whatever that is. I mean, we're sitting here physically today, which is great, but interested in how you're experiencing that, sort of in this time of change, both as you think about events and sort of remote versus in person. How have things changed for you at Adler? How are you dealing with that sort of particular transition?
Yeah, thank you, Adam. This is something that my team and I think about a lot. I came from working at a hospital where I was for the better part of a decade. That was part of a very large health system. So we were at the tip of the spear in terms of providing care, but that also meant that in terms of the recommendations for how you're interacting with others, particularly donors, we were trying to be extremely careful. And so we had some signature events that were just off the table. One of them was our biggest fundraiser at Illinois Masonic, and that was called Rally on the Rooftops. It was right across from Wrigley Field and was terrific, and was a great way not only to raise money, but to build rapport with donors. And often you saw those people physically only once a year, but you had affirmed your relationship through that event. When I joined Adler in March of last year, the first event that we were really pointing towards was up in Vancouver, British Columbia. And it was going to be an in-person event, and everyone felt comfortable doing that. And we knew that our donor base and our likely supporters were all going to be vaccinated and would feel comfortable in that setting. And it was a very productive event, and I don't think it would have been as productive if we tried to do it remotely, because there was a lot about the appeal of the honoree, who was our outgoing board chair, a very charismatic Canadian politician named Joy McPhail, and a lot about our host, a gentleman who had a museum and is a real estate developer. His name is Bob Rennie. That they're best in person. Joy really shines in person, and she was bowled over by the recognition that was given to her and by the tone of the event. Bob's a lot more muted and kind of laid back, but he's very proud of the museum that he's founded, and he's proud of the relationships that he's able to foster. He's really kind of a quiet worker, going up and having those intimate conversations with people, where Joy really commands a room and she shines forth. Those in-person events are things where both of those tactics can really work well. And again, it's hard to recapture both that energy and that approach on either side if you're not in person.
That's such a great example of sort of two different styles being able to activate successfully in an in-person environment that likely wouldn't translate to anything that would have been hosted, remotely via Zoom or anything like that. We're seeing very much the power of engaging with our clients in person, and even the difference between having a committee meeting remotely and then having a board conversation all together in one place at one time. I'm wondering how you're seeing that too, in how you and your team are interacting with prospective donors, in terms of the mix of how often you're being able to meet with people in person to cultivate and talk about potential investments versus furthering those relationships via Zoom or by phone, email, etc. What's that mix looking like for you all these days?
It's probably still a little bit skewed towards email and Zoom interactions.
Mm-hmm.
We had a Zoom committee meeting for our campaign steering committee just yesterday, and some of those folks were in Chicago. There was one that's based up in Vancouver. There's another that's based in Washington. Probably the only way that we could have done that, since we do our committee meetings all remotely.
Right.
Our board meeting, which is coming up on May 11th, will be in person. And we place a premium on getting our board members to Chicago.
Yeah.
And in the past, we've occasionally had board meetings up in Vancouver. And that's something that we just don't think that you can really substitute for.
Yeah.
And also, I really like to get our trustees feeling comfortable inviting people into their homes
Mm-hmm.
or an event space, because that's where they'll do best. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had our vice chair who collaborated with our board chair, and she invited people into her home in Hyde Park.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no way that we could have had that kind of interaction elsewhere.
Yeah.
The trips of spontaneous conversations, the fact that people stayed longer. The event had an established close time of 7:30. People were there until 9 o'clock because they were having really great conversations, most of which were sparked by the presentation that we had done. And that's gold. You can't substitute for that. People are usually not going to stay longer on a Zoom call.
Right. Well, and that dual approach, I think, we can sort of take from this time of change the best of both worlds, right? Using the technology that we have access to be more inclusive, invite more people into the conversation, but then being very intentional about saying, this is a moment when we want to be together and sort of having those real points of in-person connection that you can't otherwise replicate. Before I move on to our next question, I want to encourage the folks who are with us. If you have questions, please feel free to send those in. We are monitoring if questions are coming in, and we'll look for a time to address some of those if they come through. Chris, something else that we're dealing with, I'm hearing about it every day with our clients as we meet with nonprofit organizations and board members, is the economy. Sort of where's it going? How are donors feeling relative to it as we have swings in the market? And some organizations are nervous about making bold plans, not knowing where philanthropy is going to go and where earned revenue is going to go. So interested in sort of how Adler is feeling that as an institution, and how you and your team are feeling that relative to your conversations with donors and funders.
Sure. One of the challenges and opportunities for us at Adler is the fact that we're very tuition dependent. And so when economic conditions change a little bit, in this case, it's been that there's a strong job market and we're a graduate school, and sometimes people defer enrollment in graduate school because there are so many job opportunities out there for them. And that means that we need to spend a little bit more on marketing, make sure that we're being a welcoming place for those who come in and are considering joining us. And philanthropy can play a crucial role in that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we want to become less tuition dependent over time. We want to grow the school and have more students because we're responding to the mental health need of our communities.
Right.
But in order to do that and really help to smooth out the peaks and valleys that go with being tuition dependent, we need to have a strong philanthropic base. Adler has only been seriously raising money for, I would say, about 12 to 15 years. And that means that we're doing a lot to try to just get people thinking about a culture of philanthropy and what it means to establish it and really foster it over time. So I think that while it's challenging, when folks are focused on the economy, even when the data shows that there's still a lot of jobs out there, a lot of opportunities for people, the uncertainty does create a little bit of a pause. We experienced that just recently when we invited one of our vendors to sponsor Giving Day. And that vendor considered it for a while and then politely declined because they were being careful and cautious in terms of market conditions. But we have others that are stepping up because they understand it's a difficult time and they know that this is a time to support the institutions that make substantial change and are driving change over time that is positive for the city of Chicago, the city of Vancouver, and the nation.
I think we're seeing that as well, as sort of almost donor dependent, industry dependent. Some people are still feeling very good about their businesses, their personal wealth, whereas others are feeling the crunch a little bit depending on the sector where they are in the country or around the world, et cetera. So I'm wondering, as you think about planning for your next fiscal year, are you changing plans at all to sort of respond to those conditions, or are you sort of just continuing to move forward, knowing that the university has mission needs that need to be met by philanthropy?
I'm going to hedge a little bit and say both. We're trying to stay consistent about what we're doing. We really need to build the base of our donor pyramid. We were a very skinny pyramid before, exceptionally skinny. And so I'm still working with my team and with our president to go after some of those largest potential donors, but really thinking about planting those seeds for the future. And if we delay on that, then that will just mean that it'll be that much longer before we have a meaningful prospect pipeline downstream.
Right. Yeah, we're seeing that a lot with our clients and in conversations we're having with boards too. And we hear boards and institutional leaders sort of wrestling with this idea of saying, we want to be cautious and appropriately cautious about how we move plans forward. But at the same time, we know we have institutional needs that need to be met by philanthropy. So trying to strike that balance, I think, is something that a lot of folks are struggling with.
I would call it kind of ambitious pragmatism.
I love that.
If I can split the hairs a little bit.
Yep. So you mentioned it's been just over a year now since you've been in this role as VP at Adler, and obviously that's a very literal time of change and transition, coming into a new role and working to set standards, build a team, etc. I'm sure we have many folks who are new in roles that are with us today. Would be interested on your reflections over this last year, both specific to Adler and your situation, but also generally. Anything that you would highlight as 2020 hindsight, or things that you feel you've learned? Anything?
There are a couple of things. One is that I feel really good about my fit at the institution. I didn't know much about Adler before I joined, but I think that we're all seeing that mental health and the importance of providing mental health services is increasingly coming to the fore. It's at the root of so many issues that plague our society, from homelessness to episodes where we have a mass shooting. Frequently we hear folks referencing more mental health is needed. We won't argue that. We can't say that all of those things could be prevented because of better mental health care, but surely they would play a part. So I feel that the time for an institution like Adler's is really right now. And we're also firmly rooted in social justice because of our namesake, Alfred Adler. He is thought of as the first community psychologist, and his roots are in Austria at the same time as Freud Freud was very much the individual, ego, id, super ego,
Uh-huh.
and Adler was a term called Gemeinschaftsgefühl, which is really community feeling.
Hmm.
And that again resonates with the time that we're in now. You can't think about the individual without their societal context, the role that their friends, their family, the work that they do. How do those things affect their mental health and their ability to be responsive and capable in the circumstances that they're in?
Mhm.
So I really feel good about the fit. For my team, I inherited some really strong team members. And in particular, our grants team was just leading the charge. And so I'm grateful that we've retained our primary grants person, Ingrid Parker, there. And then she's made a great hire.
Yeah.
And the most important thing for me when bringing on someone new is that they understand their charge, that they pretty soon after coming on board, they understand what their job is, both on a daily and then on a quarterly and annual basis. And pretty soon after she made a new hire, her name is Katie, and we got her from the Field Museum where she received great training. It was clear that Ingrid had a good plan for how to bring on Katie and kind of deploy her.
Yeah.
Then soon after that, I was able to hire someone that I'd worked with previously, Jeremiah Stevens, and really turn him loose on strengthening Adler's alumni relations, restarting our alumni association, and then also firming up our individual giving. And that allowed me to concentrate on working with our CEO and the board and some of our top level donors. So bringing on those new people has been really important. It was also new for me to manage folks from a distance. We have some staff at Vancouver, and we have someone there who's been a contractor for us, but it's almost like she's in-house, and she's just really terrific, knows her stuff.
Yeah.
And Jennifer really proved to me the strength of the relationships that she's built over the past 3 years. When we had that event up in Vancouver,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been as successful without her. And there's an art to managing people well from a distance, and I would say I'm still learning that. But I'm grateful that I get to travel up to Vancouver, as I have now 3 times, to kind of build those relationships both with my staff and with our donors over time.
Shout out to the Adler advancement team if you're watching today. So it sounds like over that first year, it's really about building out a team and sort of building a culture, I'm sure, within that team about how you work together and move things forward. We talk a lot, Campbell and Company, about building cultures of philanthropy. And what that means for us and for me is everybody within an institution understanding the importance of philanthropy, understanding what their role is in advancing that, and being willing to play that role. So interested in sort of your perspective as you joined Adler, your perspective on the culture of philanthropy, and anything that you all are doing to continue to grow that within the institution.
Thank you. It's been very interesting to come into an institution that is getting into that post-pandemic feeling.
Yeah.
Because I think it's hard to maintain a culture of philanthropy when you're all remote.
Yeah.
And when you come back together and you get a chance to see the value of being in community and just palpably feel it and have those, what we call the water cooler interactions, that's really powerful. And one of the, I think, key parts to us in our culture of philanthropy is we've got a really good operations manager. And his name's Gabriel, and he just really anticipates a lot of our needs. And he helps the major gifts team and just maintains the database really well and is able to provide us with information and reports that really bring the opportunities to life for us.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like we're kind of swimming in a sea of data and not knowing how to find things, but that we've got meaningful, actionable items that are available to us on a regular basis. That, particularly as we're preparing to strengthen the culture of philanthropy through the first Adler Giving Day, has been really helpful.
That's great.
Because we were really, I want to be frank, we were really challenged by being honest about where we were in terms of alumni giving.
Yep.
With a graduate school,
Yep.
It's a little bit more challenging. And when you're coming out of COVID, your percentage of kind of faculty staff giving also suffers a little bit as well.
Absolutely.
So we're trying to provide an opportunity for people to re-engage and to understand the impact of their giving. That's one of the biggest things that we're doing right now is tell us about how you are helping to drive change at the institution. And we want to provide you with information about what your gifts are accomplishing right now.
And you all have both, as many things are, the opportunity and challenge of literally being a graduate school, but also serving a human services type of mission. And again, having that opportunity, but also the challenge of communicating that and sort of building a culture of philanthropy within. Before I go to my next question, we had a question from our audience around in-person as opposed to Zoom meetings. And this is from Miguel. Any suggestions to increase face-to-face meetings with potential institutional funding sources, or given changes, is a first meeting with a prospect conducted virtually good enough to build on? I have a thought on this, and then Chris, please.
Sure. Well, one of my thoughts is I like to get people to places where we are doing business in the community.
Yeah.
We have a couple of arms. One is Adler Community Health Services. The other is the Institute for Public Safety and Social Justice, where we're not just in the classroom, but we're out there in the community, a variety of places all around Chicago, all around Vancouver. And when we can get potential funders to make a visit with us to see what's happening, or to get them into our main facility in either Chicago or Vancouver and understand what's happening in the classroom and why our curriculum is different, then I think that's really strong. We recently attracted a gift from the Hearst Foundation to strengthen opportunities for those students that are interested in providing mental health care for men of color. And to get the Hearst Foundation there on campus and interacting with our faculty members and with our VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, that was really important. And I don't think that those things would have been as effective via Zoom. Now, that said, our president wasn't available for that visit, and he later connected with the foundation leadership via Zoom because they wanted to make sure that the upper administration was on board with this. And so we just recently secured that gift, and we had the grant launch meeting, and we're eager to put those dollars to work.
That's really interesting, and I think reflects a little bit of what we were sharing earlier when we were talking about in-person events, that we have an opportunity in our sector now to really leverage all of the channels available to us, right? Whether that's in person or Zoom or otherwise. I do think, to your point, there's still nothing more powerful than a site visit to really bring mission to the fore, not just for institutional funders, but for individual funders as well. So I think, to the specific question, I think beginning a relationship on Zoom is okay, but you always want to look for that opportunity to connect in person, especially if you can bring the mission to life. Appreciate the question. So we were just touching on culture of philanthropy, and obviously boards and volunteer leadership are an important part of that. So interested in your perspective leading advancement at Adler, and how you've thought about building a board that you can work with to help you raise funds, knowing always that you want expertise and diversity on your board as well. So just interested in how you all have approached that at Adler.
I really appreciated when I joined Adler that the institution has a track record of being extremely intentional about how it recruits for its board. So there is a board committee, trustees and governance, that is charged with evaluating potential candidates. And I also appreciated, just as the chief development officer, that they welcomed me into that meeting right off the bat. And I made some suggestions, some of which came to pass and others that didn't, but we had a healthy discussion about all those candidates. And the lens through which we view board candidates is, what skills are they bringing to the table? What are the networks that they can help us access? And then, who are they? It's important that our board is reflective of our student body and of the communities that we want to serve. So I'm really gratified that pretty soon after I joined Adler, and not through my action, but Adler received an award from the Association of Governing Boards, specifically about board diversity. And our board chair is African American, our vice chair is African American. We are over 50% minority and over 50% female.
Yeah.
And that also, that's our student body as well. Those who are getting master's and doctoral degrees are disproportionately female, and we are consciously trying to attract a diverse student body because those are the communities that we're working in.
So important to have your teams and leadership represent the people who you're serving, and that's something that we think about at Campbell and Company too. And I say to our clients all the time, board diversity and ability to support the institution philanthropically are not mutually exclusive, right? And we really have to hold ourselves accountable to make sure that we're driving towards that and not just taking the easy way out.
Absolutely. This event that we held recently at one of our trustees' homes, it was as diverse a guest list as I've personally ever been part of, which speaks some to kind of the paucity of that.
Sure.
Often in past events that I've been associated with, and the credentials and experience of those who attended, I would put up against anybody.
Yeah.
So folks are out there who have capacity and who are, again, representative of our student body and the communities that we serve.
Yeah. So you shared at in your introductory comments that your president, Ray Crossman, has announced that he's retiring from Adler after a very successful tenure. As that's been announced, and you've sort of been working through what I'm sure is the beginning of a time of change and transition. Interested to know sort of what activities have you been putting into place, initiatives that you're moving forward, ways that you're communicating with your constituency about this transition.
Sure. One thing I want to say off the bat is Ray is not retiring. He is
Thank you.
He is moving on from Adler.
Got it.
Because he felt it was the right time. He was a very young president when he
Yes.
joined, and he's still in his 50s now. He doesn't know what his next
I
step
didn't
will
mean
be.
to age you, Ray. I'm sorry.
He doesn't know what his next step will be, but at the conclusion of his time, he's going to take his well-deserved sabbatical, which he's not taken for 20 years.
Wow.
So that's the right thing for him. And I'm sure that whatever is next for Ray, it will be interesting and exciting because he's been really a visionary leader for us. Ray helped to build the school from the Adler Institute of Professional Psychology with 180 students in Chicago to Adler University with 2,000 students in 3 different campuses.
Wow.
So that's an incredible legacy to build on.
Yep.
It's a gift for whoever comes next after Ray.
Yep.
And it also means that it's not a time for Ray or for the institution to be shy. It's a time for us to say, look, we're in a much more prominent, impactful position than we were 20 years ago. And that is largely due to Ray's vision and his ability to work with the board, to work with funders, to work with the faculty and staff, and to build the institution over time. It's a great story to tell.
Yeah.
Now, there's no question that when Ray shared the news, and he had, I got a message on a Thursday morning early, Chris, do you have 20 minutes today? And you never know quite what that message means that comes through a president.
Yeah.
He wanted to share the news, and he did that with each of the senior staff and was very intentional about that. He had informed the board first, and then he had some time. We had to hold that news from our team for about 10 days. And then the communications team built out a plan to communicate both internally and externally. The thing that I was most gratified about is that Ray made a plan to communicate with top donors and with former trustees, some of whom are top donors. And the really gratifying thing has been the responses back from a significant number of those. And then we've worked with Ray and the manager of his office, who's just terrific, Liz Blundell. She's back from maternity leave. We're very happy to have her back. So we've gotten conversations scheduled with a number of those folks. And then we talk about, is this a conversation about contacts and about putting us in touch with people who can help Adler? Is it a conversation about that individual's own giving?
Yeah.
Is it a conversation about affirming that they've got estate plans in place for us? We wanted folks to know that their relationship with the institution mattered.
Yes.
Often that is transacted through their relationship with the president, but we want Ray to hand off that relationship and say, I'm going to keep supporting Adler. Adler's in my estate plans. I hope that it's in your long range plans as well. And then also we want to affirm for faculty, staff, alumni, potential supporters, existing donors, that there's a transition plan in place. We've now selected a search firm, and our board chair has communicated about that. And so we're saying, here's a process that we're following.
Yeah. So communicating strength and process moving forward. But that's such a powerful testimonial for your president, Ray, to be sharing with current and prospective donors. And also you make a great point about transitioning the relationship, making sure that it's an institutional relationship and not just a relationship held by one person, which I know is something that we're all trying to do on a regular basis as well.
It's a fine line because often the president can seem like the institution and be the lightning rod for criticism, as well as the person receiving the lion's share of praise.
Especially a long-serving president.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there are also times when we need to push Ray, who, for a president who communicates a lot, he will admit to being an introvert.
Yeah.
And, given his druthers, will go and read, 27 articles about academia. And so he recently had a book come out through Johns Hopkins University Press about LGBTQ leadership in higher education. And when I learned that was coming out, I said, great, what's the promotional plan?
Yeah.
And he kind of shrugged, and I went, Ray, we got to do something. And so we put together an event in conjunction with the Chicago Community Trust. We held it at the University Club of Chicago, and we had almost 100 people there hearing Ray be interviewed by Tracy Bain, who's a publisher of the Chicago Reader. And it was a terrific conversation and really emphasized that Ray is a leader in many senses, not just of Adler, but being a very visible LGBTQ out leader. And that's part of what makes Ray distinct and really effective.
Fantastic. So we have another question, Chris, from Shane, saying our organization will be welcoming a new chief philanthropy officer next month. Can you speak to things that your advancement team did to make your transition to Adler more effective, or perhaps things that you wish had been in place in your first weeks and months in the role?
That's a great question. Thank you, Shane. There were some things that the team did that were just terrific. They were very available. They were welcoming. They wanted to make me feel like Adler was the right place for me.
Yeah.
And so I really benefited from their wisdom, their expertise. A number of folks have been in place for a while, and we've retained the vast number of them, which I'm really grateful for, because often when someone new comes in, others depart. But the team really knows Adler well and is really loyal to Adler, and that's a great asset for us, because as we all know, you become more effective over time. When you know the institution, when you know the donor base. There were some things that, as is always the case, where you're like, I don't even know how to do X.
Right.
Whether it's find the copier
right.
or to find the policy on something.
Yes.
And so there were many questions that I asked initially, and folks were really responsive. And I still have that, that list of questions, and occasionally a year in, I'll check back. I'll be like, all right, did I get that answered? Oh, we're miles past that now.
Yeah.
Okay, great. But mostly it was people being willing to provide me with lots of information, answer all my questions from very broad to extremely detailed, and their willingness to be flexible, understanding that I wanted to learn Adler and adapt to Adler, but I also brought in some ideas from the outside. And so I think a team that can be nimble, not to completely change its approach, and you want them to be true to the institution, and if their way of doing business has been effective, to continue that, but also be open to ideas from the outside. There's certain things that I've brought in that I either did at previous jobs, or that I'm very involved in my alma mater, and I think that they do a terrific job raising money, and I'll bring ideas from there. And I'm certainly open to other ideas. So I don't think that I have the market cornered on brilliance at all.
So perhaps the most important thing is just for existing staff to be patient, right? There's going to be learning, and to make yourself available for those questions, whether practical or philosophical, as they come up. And by the way, if the sound is coming through, don't worry. If you hear sirens, Chris and I are fine. It's just Chicago Loop, and one of those things we deal with here in our office in downtown Chicago. Chris, one last question for you, and really thanks to everybody for joining today. If there are any final questions, please feel free to send those in. I know that you all are in the midst of advancing a new strategic plan, and thinking about how to advance philanthropy in support of that. And so would just be interested, that moment of change, sort of what does that look like for you all? How are you leveraging this new vision for Adler for fundraising purposes?
Thank you. We spent a lot of time on the strategic plan. It started in August of 2022 when I'd been at Adler for just about 6 months. And then we recently had it approved by the board this past February and then shared it with everyone. Mm-hmm. So the putting together of the strategic plan was about a 6-month process. Mm-hmm. We're officially launching it for the next academic year, so in September. But we can't just push go on the strategic plan and assume that everything's ready to go. We need to prepare now. And the strategic plan is a 3-year plan as opposed to a normal 5-year plan, because things change really quick in academia. And one of the things may have been kind of, planted in there from the beginning by Ray and the board chair, which is they knew probably that Ray's transition was coming at some point, and thus a shorter plan that would allow someone new to come in and not be locked into a particular process for another 3 to 4 years is probably intelligent. But also we're experiencing the headwinds right now of a great economy with very low unemployment, meaning a tough enrollment market for us.
Yes.
So the things that we're doing with our strategic plan speak to our identity as a graduate school that is focused on mental health and public policy issues, again, firmly rooted in social justice and firmly rooted in Alfred Adler's Gemeinschaftsgefühl, or community feeling. The things that we're trying to do in terms of advancement to be more responsive to that relate to the kind of inevitable campaign that you're always going to do to support a strategic plan. But then also, we knew that at the core of it had to be serving our alumni population better. The Alumni Association had kind of gone into mothballs because of some staffing changes that happened pre-COVID. And we really needed to rev that up, not only to get gifts from alums, but to give a place for our new graduates to go and feel welcome and to feel the benefits of connections with alumni.
Yes.
So we're really trying to strengthen that. We think that an alumni mentoring program can be really appealing. And we also want alums to be able to talk to each other and understand where there are job opportunities, how to handle difficulties with particular approaches. Adlerians are a particular brand of mental health practitioners, and they practice a particular kind of psychology. They like to talk to each other. And that's one of the benefits, too, of being associated with Adler University, is there's a rich network out there. So the two things that we're doing are really advancing the campaign and then moving forward with building the Alumni Association. But I was also reminded yesterday by our campaign steering committee chair that there are a lot of other objectives in the strategic plan, which advancement is there to strengthen and underpin. So it's not the things that are just kind of red lettered for us as this is advancement, but the entire plan, we look for opportunities. One of them is associated with transforming the curriculum. And we're really trying to find some philanthropic partners for that.
So I love that idea of not just thinking about how do we very literally and linearly support the initiatives that are in the plan, but also thinking about what does that mean for engagement of our alums, and sort of bringing them along in that process in addition to just raising money, right?
Exactly.
That's fantastic. Well, Chris, I just want to say thank you for the conversation today. This has been really fun for me. I hope it was fun for you. And thank you all for joining us today. I hope you took something away from the conversation. I'm getting a note that we might have one more question. So in addition to the standard donor relationship strategies, what new innovative strategies have you used during our post-COVID period?
I think one of them I referenced just previously, which is Adler Giving Day. We had not had a Giving Day. We consciously decided that we did not want to be in the the kind of tall trees of the traditional Giving Tuesday. And so therefore we scheduled our Giving Day for this coming May 10th and 11th. But the others are just trying to find opportunities to get in front of people. We recently mapped out where our alums are across North America. We have far more alums in Toronto than I ever would have guessed. We've got 300 there. So we're going to be scheduling some time in Toronto. And then we're also asking people to share their own stories about how they've been change makers. And we find that those personal testimonials are really powerful. Succinct 30 seconds to 60 seconds about why being an Adlerian is important to you, what you're doing to drive change in your community or your institution. Those are the kinds of things that other people want to see and that people tend to pay attention to.
So again, I think we've had a theme here of sort of leveraging all the channels that are available to you. And what I heard from you just say, Chris, is one, going where your people are, and two, asking people how easy is it to tell your own story by just looking into your phone or whatever it may be. So hopefully those responses are helpful for you all. Well, I will wrap us up and just say thank you again for attending. We'd love your feedback on what you think of this format and what you'd like to see from it. But just Chris, thanks again. And we hope to see you again on the next CC Live.